Do I have any experience living in or working in Florida? I've done business there, but I've never lived there. I've been there a lot, but no, not in the business. It was just kind of we would do conventions there, so I don't know if I can give you a good read on it. I do know that I like what their governor is doing with the whole cerveza sickness a lot better than anyone else. So that's good news. And also, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I think we all need to start thinking about what happens after the cerveza sickness. So what's the next cerveza sickness, right? If you think about it, everyone's assuming that, oh my gosh, we get this vaccine or whatever. And I'm talking about the normies. And they're like, oh, everything's back to normal. Woohoo, we're good to go. All right. But let's just look back in the last 10 years. This is not the first virus outbreak. We've had SARS. We had going back a little further, we had the H1N1. We had MERS. We had several others over the last decade. Now, with those, of course, we didn't treat them. We didn't do these lockdowns. But my point is, now that we've allowed the government to go this far, to completely ignore the Constitution, to lock us in our own homes and force us to close our businesses in the name of safety, why won't they do that again? And you may say to yourself, well, George, it's very unlikely that we have something this severe. Okay, granted, but why wouldn't they just do it as a knee-jerk reaction until the data comes in? And so, okay, it's not a year and a half of lockdown, off, on, but maybe it's just a quick 2 or 3 month lockdown. And then 2 years later, bam, it's maybe a 6-month lockdown. And then 3 years later, maybe it's a 3-month lockdown. See? So, and this was my concern. My biggest concern with the cerveza sickness is the amount of power and control we would hand over to the government in the name of safety. Because in my opinion, now you've opened up the floodgates, and and as our society becomes more feeble and fragile, and as our society becomes prioritizes safety above freedom more and more and more, which I definitely think they will, I think you're going to have lockdowns, and you're going to have this, what we've experienced in 2020, happen more and more often. So what does that do to businesses? What does that do to the economy? I think people really need to start thinking this stuff through, and nobody is. Nobody is. What if moving forward now we have a lockdown situation once every 3 years? How does that work with stimulus? How does that work with government deficits? How does that work with the suicide rate? How does that work with alcoholism? How does that work with drug use? How does that work with small business lending? How does that work with venture capital, IPOs? How does that work with all of the market share going to those mega corporations who are the only ones that are allowed to stay in business or open their doors during these periodic lockdowns? I don't know. What I do know, like I said, is nobody is talking about this. And I think we need to start thinking about it and start to not lose sleep, but start to weigh the probabilities of this happening and to set up a plan B or a financial game plan, or probably more importantly, a personal freedom game plan in case that's what we start to see